Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me for today's Instagram event. It was intended to be live, but Instagram had other ideas. Nonetheless, I'm glad to be able to talk with you about Lifeboat family skills. Now, what I'm going to bring to you today is sort of a taster, if you will, of what the Lifeboat family skills workshops are like. And this one's called A Pocket Guide to Supporting Young Adults with Mental Health Concerns. So I'm a little sad not to be able to see or interact with any of you today, but if you'd like to send me some questions at the end, I'll post my contact information and I'll do my best to answer them. So as I said, I'm Cindy Curtis. I'm the founder and president of Lifeboat Family Skills. And while Lifeboat is sort of a catchy name, for us it really has a deeper meaning. So we're inspired by the tradition of the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, the RNLI from the UK, where experienced volunteer seamen with intimate knowledge of the waters near their shores, the shores of their community, came together to help anyone who found themselves in peril at sea. So the Lifeboat Skills Program for parents and caregivers 18 and over who are caring for young people who are struggling with their mental health has been developed collaboratively by knowledgeable parents and expert clinicians. Our facilitators are parents who have dedicated themselves to learning these skills and employing them in their family environments with truly transformational results. We all had real difficulty finding information and practical help when our families were struggling, and determined that other families should have access to the very best of the skills we learned and the opportunity to practice them with others who are in the same boat, we set out to build this program. So we've been where you are and are eager to help you to worry less, create calm in your homes, and find hope for a better future. So today I want to give you a sample of what you can expect from a Lifeboat Skills workshop. Now, you may wonder how one set of skills can possibly be helpful to parents across the board, so to speak, given that young people in our lives are different ages and struggle with a wide variety of mental health concerns. But when you consider that 60% of mental health concerns arise between the ages of 12 and 25, there are many possible diagnoses, but the most common feature of all of them is difficulty managing big emotions, which you may have also heard being referred to as emotion dysregulation. Now, when you think about it, it's hardly surprising given the development that occurs in this period of life. The brain is still developing, especially the prefrontal cortex that is involved in executive functions or the ability to self-regulate and plan ahead. And so I've included some examples of executive functions on this slide. So controlling behavior and impulses, delaying instant gratification, regulating emotions, planning, making decisions, solving problems, making long-term goals, balancing short-term rewards with future goals, changing behavior when situations change, seeing and predicting the consequences of behavior, being able to consider many streams of information, and being able to focus attention. Now, without this capacity being fully developed and considering that they don't have a lot of life experience yet, it's a really tall order for young people to cope with this daunting list of milestones that they are expected to tackle in young adulthood. Here's just a few of them. Adjusting to a new physical sense of self, including body image, adjusting to a sexually maturing body and feelings, developing and applying abstract thinking skills, defining a sense of personal identity, adopting a personal value system, renegotiating relationships with parents and caregivers, developing stable and productive peer relationships, and meeting the demands of increasingly mature roles and responsibilities. So it's really no wonder that their emotions are a little elevated all of the time and that they're at a loss to know how to manage them effectively. And sadly, telling them to just calm down or to get themselves together just really doesn't work. Now, on the other side of the equation are parents who are trying hard to guide their young people in the young people that are in their lives through this tumultuous time. And we all expect that there will be some difficulties. I mean, teenagers are tough. But for about 15 to 20% of kids, this struggle is really intense. They are highly sensitive to everything they encounter in both their external environment as well as in their own minds. And the struggle is so overwhelming that it causes them to resort to all kinds of problematic behaviors in an effort to ease their distress. Now, this is a struggle that causes problems for them and for us. And even though we have learned to manage these developmental tasks that our young people are grappling with, when their struggle is so intense, it's really hard to know how to guide them. What's more, because this biological trait of sensitivity is relatively rare, it's unlikely that using the methods your parents use to raise you or following the good advice that friends and family are more than willing to provide is going to be very useful. The result, as you well know, is that we feel confused, frustrated, incapable, embarrassed, and frankly, afraid for our loved one's future. And the people that we confide in about these difficulties, perhaps we need to put some more rules in place or create more consequences for this unacceptable behavior. Of course, if it was that easy, you would have figured it out by now. Another compounding issue in this situation is that when we're dealing with people who are having trouble regulating their emotions, we can become pretty dysregulated as well. So when we get dysregulated, we feel stuck in negative emotions. We become really easily frustrated by even small inconveniences or annoyances, and we are prone to losing our tempers. Not the way we want to be, but a natural result of being in this emotional washing machine all the time. Now, perhaps most importantly, our focus becomes very narrow. We become stuck on how we view the situation and push for our solution to the problem, often over and over again without success, which of course is very frustrating. And we can feel that we're not up to the task of managing what's happening and we need to defer to others. Now, given that our loved ones are struggling because of their dysregulated emotions, which are causing us to become dysregulated as well, it's no wonder we get lost in this cycle of winding each other up and not being able to find our way forward. So, our focus in the Lifeboat program is learning how to deal with overwhelming emotions in our loved ones and ourselves. Now, you may wonder how helping parents to be skillful can benefit kids who are struggling so much. Now, if you consider that we spend more time with our loved ones than health professionals who see them for an hour here or there, and it makes sense that parents are both an untapped resource and one that can be really effective. There is good evidence that young people who struggle do better and are more likely to recover if they have skillful caregivers. Now, you recall about how I talked about how our focus becomes very narrow when our emotions are high, and we lose our ability to be creative about how we approach situations and we find unacceptable. And instead, we tend to double down, trying to force our loved ones to do what we feel is right. So when you feel yourself pushing hard over and over again, it can be helpful to remember that when emotions go up, IQ goes down. The pocket guide that I'm about to share with you comes into play to help us broaden our perspective so that we consider the situation from a point of view that allows us to keep the emotional temperature down and gives us more options about how to respond to move us closer to our goals. Now, I know some of you must be thinking this is going to be just like puppy training school. You think you're going to change the dog's behavior and end up learning how to change your own. And while this may seem counterintuitive, when we change our approach, our loved ones change too. Not because we're forcing them to, but because they do love us, believe it or not, and want to be in a relationship with us. It's a bit like a tennis game. If I always return the serve with a backhand, that's what they expect from me. And even though they may not like it, it's predictable. But if one day I begin returning their serve with a forehand, they need to move differently if they're going to stay in the game. As Max Planck once observed, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. All right. So let's get on with the first principle. Now, these are the principles that Lifeboat Family Skills are, the workshops are all based on. And if the first principle is not cooperating with my script. There we go. Assume that we're all doing the best we can in the moment. This may sound like a bit like Brene Brown, but she's not wrong. This picture of a rock climber reminds us that we all have our own hills to climb, and each of us, even our loved ones, are doing their best with the resources available in the situation. Not the best they've ever done or will do, but the best they can do right now. So here's a little story to demonstrate. Before my husband retired, he traveled quite a bit for work and often had meetings with large companies or government ministers. And one night his flight came in late. I was already in bed and trying to sleep. So in his efforts not to wake me, he tiptoed into our walk-in closet to change and then slipped into bed. And then early in the morning, he crept out again to dress for his meeting with a government minister. It was dark and he was trying his best to be quiet while getting dressed, raced out the door to his meeting, and just as he was about to enter the office, he looked down and discovered that he was wearing one brown shoe and one black one. Not the impression he was hoping to make, and the best he could do under the circumstances. Now, we tend to think that capabilities in one area of life or at one time in our lives predicts capability in others. So just because our loved ones may be really proficient at video games doesn't mean that they can load the dishwasher in a sensible way. As my brother says, our kids don't know how to do analog things very well. But once they understand how to do them, they're fine. This works the other way too. Because our loved ones struggle with one aspect of their lives, we tend to think that they are incapable of managing other things. For example, my son hates talking on the phone. He will do anything to avoid it. So I was truly skeptical about how he would be able to manage a job interview. Turns out, in person, he's very capable, organized, engaging, articulate. Who knew? Our best efforts and theirs change from day to day, depending on what else is weighing on our resources. When we push through our tiredness or worry to take care of our loved ones, it wears on our resources and makes it difficult for us to do our best in the situation. Take a minute to think about what each of you may be coping with that is keeping you from being your best. You might be quite surprised what you find. The second principle is appreciate multiple perspectives. Now, when these two vases are placed next to each other, we can see that they create a hidden image of a face. Some people may see only the vase, and some just the face that appears in between them. We can't really understand the whole display, though, until we can see both perspectives. We've lived with our loved ones their whole lives, and we feel like we know them pretty well. We may think our perspective on a situation and theirs are pretty much the same. But as we noted in the milestones of young adulthood, part of that journey involves defining a sense of personal identity, adopting a personal value system, and renegotiating relationships with parents and caregivers. So it's entirely possible that their perception of a situation is quite different than yours. Let me give you another example. So at one point after high school, our son was living at home while he looked for a job. Most of the applications were online, so he was at home all day by himself. Now, it had always been a bit of a struggle to get him to pitch in with household chores, but one day I arrived home to find a mess in nearly every room in the house. I was pretty upset about the state of affairs and went to find him to share my thoughts. I found him in his room, intently playing video games. Now, trying hard to remember my own guiding principle, I held on to my anger and asked as gently as I could muster what was going on. And I was really surprised by the answer. It had been a really demoralizing day, punctuated by several emails advising him that he had not been selected for an interview. He then set his mind to trying to search for more jobs he was qualified for. There wasn't much to choose from, so he had a few snacks. Then he found that his workplace was kind of cluttered, and that was stressing him out. So he moved to a new location and tried to begin crafting some covering letters. Words weren't coming, so he took a shower to help calm himself down, leaving towels and clothes in his wake. At this point, he said he looked around at the mess and that all he could see were piles of failure. He was failing himself and he was failing us because he wasn't able to get on with adulting in the way that he thought we expected. The video games were his latest attempt to distract himself from those negative thoughts. This did not help me with the problem of the mess, but it did give me some insight into what he was wrestling with and how deeply it was affecting him. And it also allowed us to talk things through and make a plan of attack together that could help him to feel more successful and create less havoc in my house. Principle 3, remember that behavior communicates need. Now, here we see a young woman standing outside and vaping. Why does she feel she needs to do this? Doesn't she know that vaping is bad for a developing brain? Does she know that you disapprove of vaping and is doing it as an act of defiance? Are all her friends doing it? She went along with it just to avoid losing their friendship. Maybe she needs a distraction from all the swirling negative thoughts in her head and finds that vaping gives her some peace. This reminds me of a conversation I had with my son a few years ago. He said to me, the meds and skills aren't working anymore. I'm going to ask my shrink for a prescription for medical marijuana. This was not something I expected or that I was really in favor of. But I said, what makes you say that they're not working? He replied, I'm so anxious. I can't sleep. And then I'm so tired that I can't concentrate in class. And then I'm anxious because I didn't get whatever the prof was saying, which is going to be on the test. Ah, I said, that's pretty frustrating. He replied, yeah, and if it doesn't stop, I'm going to fail. I said, well, it makes sense you'd be worried, but why do you think marijuana is going to help? Oh, he says, I know some kids who use it all the time for anxiety. They say it helps. I said, well, do you think it's going to help you? He sighed and kind of looked at the ground and he said, I don't know. I hear it messes with your meds, so I'm not sure. I'm also not big on smoking anything, and I don't really want to be stinking of smoke. Ah, I said, so you're thinking this is kind of a last resort? He said, yeah, I'm just going to talk to him. Maybe he'll have some other ideas. Interesting. Way different conversation than we typically would have had, where I would have immediately been on him about the dangers of marijuana without really understanding what had brought this to his attention in the first place. It can be helpful to remember that behavior is not random for any of us. Even behavior that doesn't make sense to us is usually helping our loved ones, although perhaps not in a very effective way, to get something they feel they need. Problem behaviors that result from an attempt to escape overwhelming emotions is often impulsive and so compelling that there's no real awareness of what the consequences could be until after the fact. And while we may be able to sort of clamp down on particular behavior, it isn't long before new behaviors emerge. And this can keep happening. Have you ever noticed you keep them from sneaking out at night and they find something else to be able to relieve their emotional distress, which seems like just something else to poke you in the eye, but it's honestly an attempt to really try to settle these big raging overwhelming emotions. And this clamping down on dysregulated behavior and new dysregulated behaviors showing up can keep happening until there are more effective methods of recognizing and coping with these big, painful emotions. Principle 4, be more curious than critical. I know, Ted Lasso and Walt Whitman. Also not wrong. When our loved ones make different choices than we would, being curious shows our interest in learning more about what they're thinking and helping us to earn their trust and respect. So here's another example. A colleague of mine has a son who is mad about cars. He's forever tinkering and making modifications, some of which have earned him a few tickets from the police. Now, as she arrived home one day, he excitedly invited her to the garage to see his latest invention. He drilled a hole through his headlight and threaded a piece of hose through that headlight into the engine compartment. Now, she was still reeling from negotiating how he was going to pay for his existing tickets. And his mother was stunned to know that this latest change to his beloved car had made it illegal to drive. It was again going to cost money to repair, and that this needed to be done ASAP because he needed it to get to work. Now, skillful mother that she is, she set her concerns aside for a moment and asked him why he found this so exciting. He went on to describe how exhilarating it was to have realized that his car needed more airflow to the engine and to have designed and executed a solution. She, of course, had not seen the situation from that perspective, and having that information didn't really help to solve her concerns completely. But it did give her a lot of information about what was important to her son and allowed her to acknowledge that before gently engaging him in a conversation about some of the other consequences of his artistry that were likely to get in the way of other goals he had that were also important to him. Principle 5, prioritize your relationship. To effectively support our loved ones, we need to have a strong relationship. Like the fisherman who has a big fish on the end of the line and cranks the reel very forcefully, trying to get the fish into the boat. Unfortunately, if the fish is really fighting against that activity, There's a potential to break the rod or to break the line, and then the fish is not getting in the boat. However, if the fisherman were to let the fish run and then reel it in a bit and let it run again and reel it in a bit, having that give and take, he has a better chance of influencing the future direction of the fish and probably getting the fish in the boat. So when things feel out of control, we feel like we need to take decisive action to bring our loved one's behavior back into alignment with our beliefs and values. We try to impose our solution to the problem over and over again, even though it's not working. So not only are we not solving the problem, we're also damaging our relationship with our loved one. And if one or both of us stop participating in the relationship, then we lose any opportunity we might have to guide them towards a better future. It's easier to balance preserving our relationship and speaking our minds if we realize that we can love them, even though we don't love what they've said or done. As Dr. Alan Frazzetti would say, we need to remember that we have two hands. On one hand, we love them. On the other hand, we don't like what's happening. And to find our way through the situation, we need to be sure that we have both hands in front of us where we can see them. If you find yourself walking around with one hand behind your back, you need to take a step back and reevaluate the situation before you go further. Giving priority to your relationship demonstrates to your loved one how important they are to you and your willingness to work with them and not give up on them, no matter what the situation. Our loved ones crave this kind of connection and will be more willing to come towards you and collaborate with you if you can communicate this to them. Principle 6. Try differently. Do what works. Now, Albert Einstein is credited with saying that the definition of insanity is to do the same things over and over again and expect different results. So it stands to reason then that if we want different results, we need to try something different. This photo of a compass reminds us that if we follow the heading we're on a path to a destination that is really not what we want for ourselves or for our loved ones. However, if we change our course by just a few degrees now, over time, we can end up in a different and much better place. Making changes in how we think and act is really challenging, but the effort is worth it when we consider that making just a few small changes can have a profound impact on the future for ourselves and for our loved ones. So here in a nutshell are our guiding principles that we carry in our pockets, figuratively at least, to help us support our loved ones who are struggling without making things worse and strengthening our relationships in the process. Now, if you like this presentation and are interested in learning more about Lifeboat Family Skills, you can find us very soon at Family Futures. We encourage you to join us when your life will let you. Our classes provide bite-sized presentations of concepts and skills that you can use immediately. Now, we have 3 levels of workshops, the introductory, intermediate, and advanced, and each level builds on the one before. So you need to take all of the classes at one level before you can move on to the next. Now, that said, the classes at each level stand alone. So if you take them one at a time, you can take them in any order. Now, in every workshop, you can expect practical skills based in psychology, workshops led by trained family peers who use examples from real life, interactive exercises to help you to be more confident using the skills at home. There's no confusing clinical language, and the groups are small and confidential. Now, thanks to our partners at Kickstand and Family Futures, we're offering the introductory level of the workshops in a 5-week in-person series in a cohort for a group of 20 people. Cohort just means that the same people will be at each session. So we get to know each other a little better and feel more comfortable practicing skills in the group before we try them at home. The series runs on Tuesdays from 7 to 9 p.m. beginning January 16th and continuing through February 13th, 2024. We'll be at the Westbrook Family Future site at 25 Fairway Drive in Edmonton. Now, admission is free, and there's plenty of free parking, but space is limited. So be sure to reserve your spot today at familyfutures.ca. I want to thank you very much for watching. I really hope I will see you at this upcoming session, and I invite you to reach out if you have questions. I'll be happy to answer them. Thanks again. Bye for now.